So much of people management is tied up in project management. So what does it take to make your projects run smoothly and hit their goals? Well, today's guest is going to set us on the right path for project success. Kory Kogan is FranklinCovey's Vice President of Content and Senior Consultant. She's the co-author of Project Management for the Unofficial Project Manager and has appeared as an expert on Today, MSNBC's Your Business, Forbes.com, Inc.com, and also on FastCompany.com. She's one of the authors of the following Frank Covey work sessions: The 5 Choices of Extraordinary Productivity, Project Management Essentials for the Unofficial Project Manager, and Presentation Advantage. Kory brings more than 25 years of business expertise, from the frontline positions to an executive team member. Thank you so much for joining me today, Kory. Project management feels like such a big part of what managers do every day. And yet I don't think I've ever actually talked about it on the Modern Manager podcast. So thank you for writing a fabulous book and coming on to chat with me today about this big piece of work that we are all responsible for doing like all the time. And we actually don't ever learn how to do it. So thank you.
Well, thanks for having me. It's a delight to be here.
I've heard of project management, like it's something that people get certified in. It's a thing that's like, you can even have a job or your title is project manager, right? And yet so much of what we do as managers is we have goals, we create our project plans, work with our team to execute against those, but we do it in, I think, a much more informal way than what most of us think about as kind of project management, capital P, capital M, like big thing. And what you really presented in your book, and I think the case you're making, which is so spot on, is we're all project managers. So can you share a little bit about how you see the role of manager in general, actually being about kind of we're all project managers in that way?
Yes. And what you said, you think of project managers as, or project management as this certification. They get certified to do it. And those are the official project managers out there. Those are the people that build bridges and the engineers and the software developers. That's what we think of. And when we, think about the certification and stuff like that, we're all knowledge workers. Many of us were paid to think, to innovate, to create, to execute. And so what has happened, we've just quietly slipped into this role of project manager, even though it's not our title. So particularly with the pandemic, you think about everything, the pandemic shifted everything so much that we had to remake everything. We had to remake systems and tools and, all of that, or a marketing campaign or a training program. And so we are all doing projects without even realizing it. But we intuitively do them because at home, we know how to do projects. We create, we move from one city to another. We have a wedding, we have a reunion, we do Thanksgiving dinner. Those are all projects that people are intuitively doing and using the right steps in there, but we haven't really been trained to do it. So we all in the workforce, many of us have become project managers because we think, innovate, create, and execute. That's our jobs. We just really, like you said, haven't had the kind of training or part of the training that the officials would get for real project management, which is where the problem lies.
You're right. We do this in our personal lives, maybe some of us better than others. But what's different about trying to lead a project in an organizational setting that makes some sort of training or skill development or using a consistent process? Why is it so much more valuable in the work context to have that as your foundation, as opposed to the way that we do it in kind of our normal lives where we're just kind of like doing it intuitively?
Well, the interesting thing is that we all are doing it intuitively. So I like to say that I'm a scarred unofficial project manager, because years ago, I'll give you an example. In our organization, I implemented ISO 9000, and my boss at the time kept saying, Kory, and we were a global company. And he said to me, do you need some help? Do you need a consultant? Because this is a big project. And, I pushed through, and sure enough, I got crushed when everything sort of came together. And he never let me, in a very nice way, he never let me forget that I shunned any help or process. So but I was intuitively, we're all very good at what we do. It's not like, oh, we're all bad at what we do. We need project management skills. We're good at what we do, and everybody has figured it out to push through and get into to the end result one way or another. Having said that, particularly in organizations, because we are a lot of times leading projects intuitively, the failure list of projects is very large. So when I ask groups of people, well, let's just brainstorm this up. Why do projects fail, in your world at work? And they will say, no clear objectives, no goals, don't have the right people, lack of communication, lack of buy-in from key stakeholders. There's a list that I could be anywhere in the world. When I ask that question, I get the same answers. The opportunity costs of of those is huge, and that list has become the status quo. So us people at work, again, just using our savvy to get through projects, are dealing with parts of that failure list that have become the status quo, and we are constantly paying a giant tax on it that is affecting not only the return on investment for the organization, but the people who wake up in the morning going, oh gosh, I have to go work on that project. They don't have any clear goals. There's no communication. We don't have the right people. Ugh. So the engagement levels of people are way down. And so it's a big mess.
Reminds me of just like muscling through something where
Yes.
if you just have the right know-how, it's super easy. I don't know why I'm thinking about this right now, but I used to do trapeze really regularly.
Oh.
And when I was first learning, it was all about just, get strength and pull yourself up. And they kept telling me it's not how you do it. You need the timing right. You need the technique right. And then it just happens. And once I learned that, I was like, oh my goodness, this is the easiest and the coolest thing ever. And I feel like as unofficial project managers, we are muscling our way through and making it so hard on ourselves and so hard on team members and hitting roadblocks and those failure rates. And if only we had a little bit of skill, a little bit of process, a little bit of know-how, we could save all of us so much time, energy, money, right? All the things. So why don't we shift into what are the steps of project management that we should be using give us the overview first, and then we'll dive into each of them.
First of all, with the work we do, we're very big on what does somebody's mindset need to be? Because, we can say, here's a list of things to do, but unless you're like, aha, I get it, that powers the list of, okay, now how do we do it? So our overarching mindset is that value plus people plus process equals project success. And we learned a long time ago, and so did the rest of the project management world, although they more recently caught up, is that this can't just be about, okay, we need to scope it and we need to do this and we need to do this. The other two components have become more important. People became more important a decade ago, and value has become more important now as we move into the agile project management as sort of the main force of project management. So when we say value, let me break this down at just a little overarching view here. When we say value, there's a lot of projects that get started that end up not even being what it was supposed to be. And it's like that turned into a monster, kind of thing. So value is about, as a project manager, am I always making sure that we are hitting the mark on what the outcome is supposed to be on the project? I'll stop there on that. The people side is, and we used to say people plus process equals project success. You can have all the spreadsheets in the world. You can have all the questions to ask in the world. If your people are showing up like, oh gosh, not that project and not that leader, that's a problem. So how do I have people who I am inspiring to want to play on my team and want to play to win? So I've got the value of the project, I've got the people, and then do I have the right process around scoping and planning, engaging, tracking, and adapting and closing. So if we understand, okay, I get it, value plus people plus process equals project success, that's a great start.
I love this. I always just love little, simple, memorable equations like this. And
Yeah.
as a leader, right, it's so easy to say, am I attending to all three of these, right, as we move forward at any stage of the game? So super, super helpful. When you're trying to figure out what the value is and who the people are and how to inspire them and what your process is, do those things happen kind of do you start with process and then determine the value through the process and find the people and inspire them through the process? Like, does process kind of undergird everything anyways?
Yes, a really, really great insightful question that you're asking and synthesis of what I said, because everything sort of is inside of the process. So in the process, scope is there's 5 steps that I just mentioned. So scope, plan, engage, track and adapt, and close. Scope, even when we do workshops, takes the longest because you really need to establish a foundation there and know what's going on with the project. And even right through there, we need to do really good. We need to identify our key stakeholders, our key stakeholders, understand and ask the right questions and know what answers we're looking for to know exactly what a win looks like for that project. Why are we doing it? How is it going to benefit the team of the organization? How does it align to the mission, vision, strategy? How do we measure success with that? So, it's a mini lesson here on how do we not just accept, well, the project is really important. That's why we need to do it. That is not a high value answer. We really need to get to the meat and potatoes of that to make sure that we're getting to what is the value to the organization. And like you said, underpinning the rest of the process as we're planning, as we're executing, tracking and adapting is about, I'm sure you've heard the term sprints. We're not going full agile here, but how am I in the plan putting in stopgaps where we're going to check in on the scope? Are we headed in the right direction? Should we make any careful changes without going crazy to it in order to make sure that we're at full value? And some other forces may not have come along that does encourage us to rethink what that end goal is. So to answer your question, value underpins it, and the people, inspiring my people to want to play on my team and win also through every step of the process.
Makes so much sense. I want to dive a little deeper into this scoping phase because I think this is where we often kind of get in trouble because we don't get the clarity that we need and sometimes feels a little, I'll say people want to move fast, right? Like we need this goal and we need it tomorrow. And so there's no time to ask questions and there's no time to write out documents and make sure everybody's on the same page with what we're doing. So can you talk a little bit about like what does the scoping process look like in addition to asking these questions? Are there other parts of the scoping phase that we really need to be making space and time for? Like, and why is that so important to get right up front rather than kind of, I think what we do now, which is a little bit more of like, we get going and we kind of figure things out as we go. And sometimes that allows us to move really quickly. And sometimes it means that we make some mistakes and have to take 2 steps back before we can take 2 steps forward again.
So again, I love your questions. And remember I said, I'm an operations, type executive. So even listening to you, I'm always about return on investment and operational costs and all of that. So even when you say 2 steps forward, 1 step back, my mind went to, okay, what's that, how's that working for you? And what's the cost of that when you go 2 steps forward and 1, step back kind of thing. So the saying we use, or the quote from Dr. Stephen Covey, is that when we're working with people and projects, fast is slow and slow is fast. Fast is slow and slow is fast. So, it's sort of what I just said. If we go too fast, you're going to pay the price in the back. That's even the failure list that I was telling you about. You're going to pay a terrible price. So if we're just like, no, let's just, go and figure it out. you're going to have heartache. And I mean, if you just think about it, we didn't meet the deadline. The customer is upset. The employees are all mad because they look, silly. I mean, the costs are amazing. Slow is fast. If we just can get our head around taking our time up front, knowing it feels like, oh my goodness, I don't have that much time, the return on that is gigantic. And for some people, it's hard to see, but it's a principle and it's true. So having said that, with scoping, again, making sure, first of all, that you identify the right key stakeholders. And I say that because it sounds easy. It's like, all right, well, who makes the decisions? Who has the authority? Who has the need? There's signers. There's two that we forget, and we use the acronym DANCE. So decision makers, who has the authority, who has the need. C is connections, who has the connections, and E is energy. Where we forget key stakeholders sometimes, I'm going to go to energy first. You have some people around the project that might be, I'm sure your listeners can relate to this, a little negative. They're not the most helpful, right? And I can see your face too, and just how you're thinking about that. And I hate to say that, I don't mean this in a bad way. They say, bring your enemies, your friends close, bring your enemies closer. Not that they're your enemies, but we also need to be, in this day and age, very inclusive. So because somebody has a different opinion, we don't want to exclude them. We should invite them into the fold and be person enough to, hear them out and listen. Connections are people that are high influencers. So I do a lot of projects, and I have people out in the field that they've been around for a long time. Everybody loves them. They're very well known for their great work. And I include them as key stakeholders because when I get that person with not so great energy or just has a style of that, risk avoidance, whatever, I now have people on the team that can help neutralize and help make them feel better. So a lot of times people will forget the key stakeholders besides the signers. So imagine when somebody with not so great energy shows up and it says, excuse me, you didn't consider me and what I think, and it shuts the project down for a minute. So we want to make sure we have the key stakeholders. The questions, it's not just any questions. There should be a lot of organizations have it, and we do too, and there's a tool in the book, a key stakeholder interview tool. What's the set of questions that is going to get you to the end result so that you have a consistent process around that? So it's not like, hey, what do you want the project to do? Whatever. It's very clear in what is the project, what's the outcome of the project? How are you going to measure success? What's priority, time, budget, or quality? So that triangulation. And I'll tell you, my favorite question that gets asked from it is, what are the exclusions? What are we not including? I think that is a fabulous question up front, because if you ever heard of scope creep, which is different than change for the good of the value. But when we start to say, well, for this project, it's only going to be this target audience, but not that. So everybody's on the same page and we don't have assumptions. So the key stakeholder interview, having a clear set of criteria for what makes for good answers is really important. And then just making sure you have all the key stakeholders on the same page, which doesn't always happen either. So now I'm just going to finish this by answering this question by saying I'll go back to what you said. People skills have to be integrated into this, because there's two areas that people stumble over in organizations around the key stakeholder interview. One is the fear of coming to somebody like me or some other executive and asking us questions for whatever reason. I don't like that people are intimidated by me. I obviously have to work on that, but it's like, oh no, we can't ask Kory, which is not true. If you come to me and say, oh, Kory, I'm working on a project. Do you have some time to talk to me? No, I don't. But if you come to me and say, listen, I'm working on a project that's going to affect the, fourth quarter something, for delivering this for whatever reason, I'm like all ears. I'm like, oh, okay, that's really important to me. Let's talk. So there's how do you approach key stakeholders to get their attention. And the second thing is key stakeholders aren't always going to be like, oh no, I get it. We're all on the same page. So you need your people skills to how do I approach key stakeholder? But more importantly, to do a little conflict resolution when you get them in a room, and how are you going to help them negotiate to get to a common outcome? That's the answer. All that takes time.
Yes. Yes. But time, as you said, very well spent, because it will save you even more time on the backside. I'm wondering if you can share a story from your own experience or from clients you've worked with where that scoping really made a big difference from what was kind of initially maybe thought of as, here's what we're doing, turning into like a no, here's actually what we're doing and how this is all gonna look.
Well, I think what I can tell you, there was, I've seen grown people cry, over this. I think big multi-million-dollar project. They were 4 or 5 months into it. And sort of, I'm going to go back to the key stakeholder. A stakeholder showed up that had not been talked to, or they hadn't thought of as a key stakeholder, and showed up 4 months later, millions already sunk cost. And based on that key stakeholder saying, no, we shouldn't be going here, we should be going here, and what the project outcome should look like, it destroyed the original 4 months of work that had been done. And they sort of had to start over. And there was a lot of pain in that too, because the project had already been, the cost of this is so amazing. They were down the road on it. There was already some problems with the management of it, and really making sure everybody was doing what they were supposed to do. And then on top of that, this came into play. And it's not a good story. That person got reassigned to some other role. And probably, they say that a failed project will cost 3 times the original budget. And I will say this was almost mathematically correct, because they had to start from scratch again. They brought in an outside company, and the project ended up, standing up over time, over the next couple of years. But the cost of it was almost 3 times what the original budget was.
Oh my gosh, that sounds painful, and really demonstrates the importance of having those conversations with all, like really identifying who the key stakeholders are up front and talking with them. And on a much smaller scale, I did some work with a regulatory team inside of a medical health space. And one of the things that they complained about was that everyone kind of looked at them as like the no people, because by the time projects would get to them for like the regulatory sign off, they would inevitably have to say like, well, this doesn't meet the standard, this law, this, rule just changed, or this thing came out, or that thing no longer is, expired for or it's not appropriate for this usage, or whatever it was. And how frustrated they were that had become their reputation. And they're like, if only every time these teams get kicked off, if only they would come to us and include someone, in the team, getting information early. And if they would check in with us regularly as the project is unfolding, like if only, then we could be yes people. We could help make this thing flow instead of being the ones who are putting up roadblocks at the end. And I feel like it's the same, right? That's the same thing, that like we need to be talking to those folks early and then keeping them in the loop, which I feel like that now this is the perfect transition to like, once you've got your scope, right? Then there's the whole management process of the work plan. So let's skip over the creation of the work plan and get to the place where you've got your work plan. You've got your core folks who are executing on it. What are some of the tips and tricks to keep things moving and avoid the things just kind of slowing down because no one's paying attention, or things getting all kind of out of whack, or forgetting about those key stakeholders because they're not assigned any tasks? So like, what are some of those ways that we keep the project moving and on track and in scope and kind of, all the good things?
All that stuff. Just one quick comment on the key stakeholders. Again, because I am involved in projects every day, and I think the honing of key stakeholders is an ongoing job. Because even for me, in the projects that I work on, I'm always, even though you think you've covered the universe, and I don't say this in a bad way, it's a learning process. Like, you know what? It would be so much easier if so-and-so saw this sooner than later. So it's almost like I've got my key stakeholders and then I have like a smaller group too. But again, that goes to the sprints and how you sort of get feedback along the way without, the other thing you can do, you can go rogue on it too. You got to find the sweet spot because it's like, oh no, we're making a million changes to try to satisfy everybody, and that won't work. So we've got our plan, but I can't jump over it just to say to keep things organized, you do have to have a plan. So plan is the second part of the process. You can't just jump over that. And there are project management tools that we say, just try them because people are scared to death of a Gantt chart or whatever. And it's amazing. Once you know a few project management principles like dependencies and duration, I find those two things to be wonderful time management tools, thinking tools for me, just in day-to-day life, let alone that. But once you know dependencies, duration, critical path, you are like, oh my goodness, I wish I had known this before because it can be life-changing. And, it's like, Kory, get a life. Why are you so excited about a Gantt chart? But be that as it may, that will keep you organized. However you do that, even if you use Excel, which most people do. Beyond that, it's now engaging the people to do the work. How do we hold accountability? So let me just say that the behaviors, when I say people, we need to inspire people. That is the first place we need to go to keep the work moving, because I have a team doesn't report to me. They're matrix. They're from all over the place. I didn't even want to be a leader. I wanted to work on projects and get boomeranged on me. I have to manage people. And so and I said, the only way you're going to live through this if you know how to inspire people to want to volunteer their best efforts. So there's a load of leadership courses out there, right? We said, listen, people plus process, our people process, 5 behaviors. And it's taken from the work of Stephen M.R. Covey, the Speed of Trust, out of his 13 behaviors of high trust leaders. If you could just do these 5 really well, you'll be okay. And they are demonstrate respect, listen first, clarify expectations, extend trust, and practice accountability. And when you think about that, it's like, well, our parents taught us to do that. But I'll tell you what, when you're under pressure to work on stuff, and I'm originally, not to stereotype myself, I'm originally from New York City. I've lived outside the city forever, but I'm very direct, very to the point. And when I'm under pressure, can I come off a little, not, like just do it because I said so? I can, if I'm not careful, and that puts people off, Can you listen under pressure really well when somebody's like, no, I don't have time for you right now? Or so what that goes to, are people really engaged? Clarify expectations. It's not about the project. It's about, do people on the team understand how their part of it fits into this big thing? So it's not just a task. It's a contribution to the project. And then I have to practice, I got to extend trust. I have to delegate I got to get good at, delegating these. I can't do everything myself. And I need to practice accountability, not only hold people accountable, but I need to model accountability as well. So so again, that underpins the process. And if I'm doing that well, I'm executing the project because we got the plan and everybody is doing their part. Having said that, even within that, you can have a lot of meetings. We are well known for what we call a team accountability meeting. It's once a week. Sometimes it's once a day, depending on the ferocity of the project. It's not a staff meeting. It's not a big operations meeting. It's a check-in. And I'm going to use a sports metaphor, forgive me. But, when you see a team on the field or, on the sidelines and they're high-fiving each other, they're just sort of psyching each other up and they're all committed to do what they can do to win the game. And it's the same thing here. Every week, we just meet. We have our visual scoreboard of what's happening with the project. I'm checking in like, nope, I got this done this week. Here's my commitment for this week. And the leader's job is just to, what we say is, clear the path for them, not the leader. This is not a meeting with a leader is telling people you're going to do this. It's the people showing up and saying, here's what I'm doing to keep this project going. When you work from, I hate to say, from the bottom up that way, when people have ownership of this, they will stay more engaged longer through the project, because sometimes on long projects, it can really, you do need to really, how do I keep people excited along the way? So those are a couple of things, the people skills, team accountability sessions, and then just, just really listening to people and making sure everybody is, feeling okay about what they're doing.
I love this. And I feel like those 5 behaviors are such a great place to start with norms for your team, to lay those expectations up front, to hold everyone, including yourself, accountable to them. And those, I love weekly or even daily team meetings like that, where it's really efficient, it's really focused, and it's really inspiring, and it's clarifying, and it just helps everyone power forward and feel good about the work. So yes, yes, yes to all of that. Unfortunately, we have to wrap up. So Kory, can you tell us about a great manager that you worked for and what made this person such a fabulous boss?
I have been very lucky in my career, because the only reason that's a tough question for me to answer is because I've been blessed to have a few really, really, really good leaders. And I will say, I'm not, I don't have a PhD. I don't have a master's. I learned a lot of what I learned on the streets of New York and these fabulous leaders. One of them in particular, he was interesting because he saw this, and actually, again, it's hard for me to narrow down, but he saw potential in me that it's not that I didn't see it in myself, but again, I didn't have a finance background. I didn't have a lot of, background, and I started my career in sales, and he just saw something in me, and he was he was the same guy who yelled at me about the project I mentioned earlier. He's like, "Don't you need a consultant?" But he never judged me for not having a lot of education. He saw that I had some talent, and he just kept putting me into positions that would challenge me. And he would also say, "Okay, Kory, here's what you need to learn this year, because a year from now, in our new fiscal year, I'm going to put you over our finance team," which that was the funniest thing, only because my older sister was a big CFO in New York City. And I remember calling her one day, this is very early in my career, but he had put me into a position. I called my sister and I said, "Ellie, can you tell me what a purchase order is?" And so I didn't have much financial background at all, but I spent the year, I went to, at the time, Barnes and Noble and Amazon, and taught myself everything about finance. And it was a third or fourth, I ended up being the executive vice president of worldwide operations for my previous company. And it was thanks to him. He just was a great mentor, saw things in me that I hadn't yet seen in myself, although I was open to it. And just was great to work for. But I was also a little fearful of him, which was not bad, because he taught me trust but verify too. So he was a great guy.
Wow. I cannot even imagine getting put into a position that I knew nothing about. That's wow. Very brave of you, and very brave and impressive of him to have seen that in you. All right. And what is the name of your book? Where can people get it? And where can they keep up with your work in general?
Yeah, so it's project management for the unofficial project manager. It's the updated version. I mean, the first one came out in 2015, but if you're on Amazon, you want to check for this color, and it says revised and updated. So any of the booksellers that are out there, plus FranklinCovey.com, you can find all of our stuff, including the books, and then you'll find me on LinkedIn, Facebook, just Kory Kogan. You'll find me. I'm happy to connect with anybody. So thank you for asking that, Amy.
Thank you again so much. I feel like there's so much more we could have gotten into. I'm sorry we ran out of time, but I think just these just kind of core principles of how to make project management a little bit easier, a little more smooth, a little more fun and inspiring for all of us. And I'm just really grateful.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.